Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the COVID-19 update show here live on ITV networks. It is a Thursday morning. It is the 22nd day of the month of Sha'ban 1441, the English date being the 16th day of April 2020. Once again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us in good health and in good spirit, inshallah, and to grant shifa and complete cure to all those that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, especially not only in our hometowns or in our country, South Africa, but worldwide, globally. We find that over 2 million people have been infected by the coronavirus pandemic now, that have been accounted for or tallied for those people that are affected, and we do not know about. Those numbers still need to be taken into consideration. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for one and all. And we do know when any crisis happens, sometimes the most vulnerable people, the people that have to leave their homes not because they want to and go into different camps and refugee camps all around the world and the globe, are sometimes forgotten, especially in this time that we are living in with the coronavirus pandemic. So this morning, inshallah, we're going to be focusing on those people who are living in refugee camps around the globe, but more particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, which we are bringing it closer to home. We're going to be joined by the Regional Communication Officer of the UNHCR, that is the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. So on the line, live via Skype from Nairobi this morning, we are joined by Sister Amina Rai. We say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, Amina, and Jazakallah for joining us on our COVID-19 update this morning.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me.
Firstly, we know we are into day number 21 of the lockdown here in South Africa. Ours has got extended for another 2 more weeks. What's the situation in Kenya at the moment when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Here in Kenya, we're on a provincial lockdown, so meaning that we can't travel between provinces, i.e. Nairobi or Mombasa. I myself, I've been working from home for over 2 weeks, and we've been exercising social distancing and being told that if we go outside, we have to wear face masks. We also have a implemented curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. So far, the cases here are around 225, and I think the government's doing an outstanding job in trying to protect the communities, and it's likely that we're going to be dealing with this curfew for a longer term.
Coming back now to the UNHCR, Amina, before we go on to the actual topic this morning with regards to how the pandemic has affected refugees around sub-Saharan Africa, firstly, just give us a brief overview of the mission of the UNHCR.
So UNHCR, that's a good question. UNHCR is a UN refugee agency. We're an intergovernmental organization mandated to protect people forced to flee because of conflict, violence, persecution, natural disaster. Our focus is really to safeguard their rights and well-being, and to ensure that when they're forced to flee, from the moment that they're fleeing to the moment that they seek refuge in a country, that UNHCR is by their side to support them. Tangibly, we provide the provision of healthcare, education, shelter, protection, counseling, and we work with a wide variety of implementing partners to ensure their well-being. It is a large mandate, and the numbers are increasing each year. Currently, we're facing a global total of 70.8 million people who are persons of concern for UNHCR who've been forced to flee their homes. And as you mentioned, the focus on Africa, which is rightfully so, it has the largest population of forced displacement at 26.4 million people. So it's a large mandate, and it's a focus that we maintain throughout 134 countries. In fact, almost 90% of our workforce are in the field working directly with people of concerns. And it is something that we work closely with the governments and other implementing partners with.
Amina, you make mention of a staggering amount of people, that's over 20 million in Africa. With regards to the pandemic, then, how is the UNHCR responding to the pandemic in the camps that are in the African region?
You know, COVID-19 is not only a huge, enormous health challenge, it's also an immense humanitarian challenge. So for UNHCR, the priority is to protect these vulnerable communities and to work with governments to do so. What we are asking for is that governments include refugees within their health systems, within their health programs, within the provision of their health interventions. For refugee camps, it is a very grave concern. You know, we are only as safe as our most vulnerable populations. So right now across the region, we've been doing a number of preventative measures to ensure that we can curtail this pandemic. This has included, for example, in Kenya, we've been giving out hygiene kits, including soap, jerry cans. We've also been doing communication and awareness about hand washing, social distancing. We've established, for example, in the two camps here, Kakuma and Dadaab, and Kenya, I should say, hosts over 490,000 refugees and people of concern. We've also established 45 hand washing stations. And we've been doing this across the region, distribution of hygiene kits, distribution of soap, which may seem like very basic to you and me, but are actually quite luxury items for refugees in these camps. You know, these camps are overcrowded, they are congested. In some cases, social distancing is not possible. So ensuring they have the right basic needs, basic items to keep themselves healthy and safe is important. And also beyond the camps, you know, we have, you know, over 60% of refugees living outside of camps in urban areas. In South Africa, for instance, we've worked with faith-based communities and distributed hygiene kits and items to over 660 refugees and members of the vulnerable community. So it is far-reaching, it is far-wide. It's a grave concern for UNHCR to ensure the safety and protection and health of refugees. For this, we have launched a global appeal with UN and other partners globally for $2 billion, and for UNHCR in particularly $222 million, which is needed globally to protect the 70.8 million people that fall within under UNHCR and a partner mandate. So it is a huge undertaking, and I think it's incredibly crucial that focusing on the fact of protecting these vulnerable communities is necessary to safeguard all communities, really.
We're talking about then protecting these most vulnerable communities. What are the challenges on the ground when in these refugee camps? You make mention of social distancing. That cannot be achieved, we know, in refugee camps. And then also the need on the ground. What have UNHCR seen?
You know, in these congested, vulnerable communities, be it where refugees live in urban settings or within these camps or informal settlements, basic necessities are so vital. What we're seeing is that there is an issue of overcrowded, over-congested, and not enough distribution of critical items that are so necessary and needed. So we have been doing our very best, and refugees are incredibly resilient people who also have been working together with the host community, with UNHCR and partners, to try to ensure the safety of their communities. One thing that we're working on is, in Kenya, for instance, is establishing isolation facilities and training over 100 healthcare workers within the camp so that they're able to respond to COVID-19 symptoms and be able to ensure proper action should that fall into their remit. And that's something that we're scaling across the region. So it's really about the host community, the governments, UNHCR, our partners, and refugees working together in a holistic and harmonious way to ensure the safety and protection of these vulnerable communities.
Coming back to the economy side of things, Amina, we've seen what this pandemic has done to global economies. We've just seen the United States suspending its funding to the World Health Organization. What has, or the impact has COVID-19 had, firstly on the UNHCR and then also on refugees when it comes to talking about the economy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern is that in the long run, the social and economic costs may outweigh the health costs. We're seeing right now, for example, with refugees, there's a loss of livelihoods because their livelihoods were very vulnerable to crises in itself. You know, it's difficult to ascertain at this time what economic implications it will have for agencies, but just to say that this humanitarian and social challenge is something that needs to be supported as opposed to, you know, pushed aside. So I would say it's very necessary right now that in the long run, we need governments, we need participatory partnerships and actors to look in terms of the long run, in terms of the strategic gains and values in supporting humanitarian relief responses to ensure that further damage from this pandemic will not be weighed onto their societies and communities. And that really does require humanitarian relief agencies to help support with such interventions.
Talking about support and initiatives, before we go on to that, just one quick question. Before or once the COVID-19 pandemic hit the countries across the globe, has the UNHCR seen an increase in the amount of IDP people, internally displaced persons, or has that level been maintained even now during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the thing is that this pandemic, COVID-19, is blind of borders and it's blind of boundaries. It will hit war-torn countries and it will hit urban settings. So with what we're seeing right now is that it's exacerbating situations where there are conflict-stricken countries that are facing already internal war or violence or persecution against certain individuals. But the focus really for UNHCR is to ensure that the forced returns is not exercised, that refugees that have fled from their homes, that are in neighboring countries, are not forced back. And those that are IDPs, are internally displaced persons, it's difficult at this point to ascertain if the numbers have increased. We're continuing to monitor it, but we can say that it definitely is exacerbating the concerns of how this will have far-reaching implications on people forced to flee generally.
We come back to the issue of support. You made mention not only on governmental level, but support within communities, etc. What initiatives are then being undertaken by the communities of the refugee camps?
As I mentioned, refugees are incredibly resilient people. And so we're seeing, for example, refugee artisans are undertaking the face mask production, which is very, very critical, and which we see a shortage of globally. Being able to get a face mask right now is quite difficult. And so people are now turning into innovative ways of being able to produce them themselves, including refugees in the camps, and being able to produce it for the refugees in those communities. We're actually with UNHCR, we're very fortunate to have a campaign that was born within Africa called the Luku Luku Tribe. And the Luku Luku campaign is about supporting and advocating for compassion and resilience and tolerance of each other and of people forced to flee. So it's championed by a number of celebrity supporters who together had put in a response for COVID-19 to practice social distancing and protect people who are less fortunate. One of the initiatives that the celebrity supporters are undertaking is to help with the funds drive to support a campaign that we are going to be launching very soon called Masks for Good. And it's to provide the fabric and the equipment and the material for the refugees within these communities to make masks for themselves and possibly even supply it to host communities as a form of income generation in terms of the long-term plan for it. So yeah, there is a number of different initiatives that refugees are taking on the ground, including helping with community awareness and understanding and dissemination of information regarding hygiene and practicing of social distancing. But first and foremost, it's really for them to be able to be given the necessary items they need to keep themselves and their families safe, for which the public, people like you and I can play a big part in.
Before we go on to how our viewers can get involved, another question comes to mind. The education of educating the refugees with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, how has that been undertaken?
In some refugee camps, we have radio feeds that go on where there's, in the refugees themselves, partake in these radio shows where they discuss how it's important to wash your hands, how to wash your hands, the importance of social distancing, how germs can easily be transmitted from one person to another, how the virus spreads. In many ways, they also do these community gatherings within each of these refugee camps. We work closely with the sort of identified community elders who help UNHCR and partners disseminate the information on how to practice these mechanisms to stop the spread of the pandemic, including we have other types of communication items, including big posters and billboards that talk about simple steps that they can take to keep themselves safe. The hand washing stations have information on how to wash your hands properly. Community partners that we support do a lot of outreach from door to door with refugee families, going from shelter to shelter to provide them with hygiene kits and information as well. So there's a number of different interventions that are currently being exercised to do the utmost to be able to raise awareness, provide basic knowledge, and disseminate key core relief items, essentially.
As we know, many hands make light work. How can the viewers of ITV get involved with regards to assisting the UNHCR in assisting the refugees during this COVID-19 pandemic?
You know, as I mentioned earlier, there is a real immense financial need for UNHCR to be able to carry out its operations and ensure that the pandemic is safeguarded from refugee communities. And as I mentioned, vulnerable communities are necessary to be safeguarded to protect all of us. You know, thinking about the time of the month that it is and how we have Ramadan approaching, UNHCR will be running our Ramadan appeal again, inshallah, and we will hopefully want to raise money from the Muslim community who have been incredibly generous and supportive to help the most vulnerable, you know, widows, orphans, elderly, which are comprised of many refugees. So we do have the Ramadan appeal that we are going to be running for the course of Ramadan, and it will be amazing to be able to welcome sadaqah and zakat to support refugees. You know, if we're thinking about our own personal experiences right now with mosques being closed and pilgrimages to Mecca being suspended and us not being able to do the things that we enjoy during Ramadan, like hosting community iftars and so forth, you know, it gives you a little bit of a glimpse of what people forced to flee face each day, if in fact far, far worse. You know, when you're forced to flee and you're leaving with nothing but the clothes on your back, and you're arriving at a refugee camp with absolutely nothing and no way to protect and support your children, providing necessary critical relief items such as basic soap, a kitchen set, medicine, emergency shelter, which is a tent, may seem very basic to you and I, but are really luxury and essential items for refugees. So our hope, inshallah, really is that, especially in the face of this pandemic, that we are able to raise the necessary funds to support refugees across the globe, and with great focus as well on this region. So we have a donate site I can provide. It's donate.unhcr.org/Ramadan. And we also do accept zakat. So we are recognized as a reputable zakat contributor within the organization. And the website for that is zakat.unhcr.org.
Lastly, Amina, a Regional Communication Officer for the UNHCR, some closing comment for the viewers of ITV this morning.
Basically, just to say that it's really wonderful that ITV has put a spotlight on refugee and vulnerable communities, because often it's the vulnerable communities that are forgotten but that require the most assistance and help. So I just would say to everyone that I hope we all keep safe, that I hope that this pandemic, inshallah, ends soon, but that to not let go of the fact that there are people in need, and that each one of us, despite our circumstances, can do whatever we can to support them.
Amina Raik, Regional Communication Officer for the UNHCR. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you safe and your family safe, and reward you and the team for all the good work and great work that you people are doing when it comes to assisting the most vulnerable in our communities. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take you people from strength to strength. Fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Jazakallah khair.
Amin. That was the Regional Communication Officer for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees talking to us about the conditions in the camps with regards to COVID-19. Sometimes they are forgotten in the mainstream media at the moment. You would find that there is no real mention of what's happening in the refugee camps, etc. So just giving us a brief overview of what's happening in the refugee camps, and a staggering amount of millions of people people that are refugees, and as Amina made mention, that they leave the home only with the clothes on their back, and when they reach these refugee camps, that's all they have. So how much more thankful and grateful to the Creator that we should all be in the conditions that we are in. Although we are in number day 21 of the lockdown in South Africa, we still have a roof over our head, we have 4 walls, and we still have more than one pair of clothing or shoes, etc. to wear. So we always should be thankful to the Almighty at all times, inshallah. We go for our break, inshallah. When we come back, inshallah, we're going to be speaking to a political analyst. That is Ibrahim Fakir, not a stranger in the political sphere here in South Africa. And inshallah, we're going to be unpacking the impact of the lockdown in South Africa when it comes to the political side of things. Keep watching. Welcome back to the COVID-19 update. It is day 21 of the lockdown here in South Africa. As I said, 16th day of April 2020. We're now talking politics and how COVID-19 has affected the political sphere within South Africa. We are joined by not a stranger to the screens of ITV or to the airwaves when it comes to the issue of politics, and that is Ibrahim Fakir, who is a political analyst. We say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, Ibrahim, and Jazakallah for joining us on the COVID-19 update show.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and shukran for having me.
Alhamdulillah. Day number 21 of the lockdown in South Africa. Ibrahim, what has been the impact of the lockdown so far? As we know, it has been extended for another 2 weeks till the end of the month. Your view on this?
I think it was necessary. And it was necessary because it's not going to eradicate the virus yet. And inshallah, there will come a time when soon it will do so. But in order to ensure that the health services can manage, that the necessary treatment centers, facilities, infrastructure, medication, equipment, and so on is procured and ready, the lockdown was necessary. Now, obviously, one appreciates that it comes at economic cost, it comes at the cost of livelihoods, it comes at the cost of social life, and for many of us, it comes at the cost of our spiritual and religious lives. However, we know that these sacrifices not only have to be made, but they're also being compelled upon us by our religion, and many other religions, that the sanctity and the protection of life and health, safety is paramount. And so that's the second reason why it was necessary. And again, we know that the huge social cost that it comes at is a huge sacrifice, but at the end of the day, one has to ask the question, is the sacrifice necessary for the preservation and maintenance of life and social life later on? Or do you risk taking chances now? So, I can appreciate fully why the lockdown needed to have been extended, and I imagine one can see the rationale and the logic for why there may be further, not necessarily as strict lockdowns, but certainly continuing of very serious social distancing. And by social distancing, one obviously means things like limiting massive numbers of people within a specific gathering in a specific space, or maintaining safeguards such as closing certain public amenities at certain hours of the day, not allowing congregating of clients or customers or people in those spaces. To some degree, also maintaining very strict controls at the borders, which means allowing travel not only interprovincially, but inside the country, but also outside the country, facilitating entry of people into the country, perhaps a stricter visa regime. You might, in governance terms, even be talking about the fact that now all visa regimes and free entry regimes be suspended, and that you create a requirement that everyone who wants to enter the country has to not only apply for a visa, but with that visa, submit a clearance certificate within the last 14 days that clears you of a test of being virus free, and that test has to be covered. The cost of it have to be covered by yourself, because the cost will simply be too astronomical for countries to have to pay for this. So there are these monumental consequences. They're also going to come at monumental costs, but they are necessary. For me, the tragedy is that, insofar as we have an extension, insofar as our lives are so disrupted, our fixation still remains on what can we do, what can't we do, how are we going to fix the economy, how are we going to be able to get out and about and live our daily lives. And I must be honest, I don't think that, the message that we are meant to take from this crisis, and it's not to simply turn inwardly, but there was a space for reflection, for recalibration, for rehabilitation of ourselves, of our economy, our social lives, to create greater fairness, to create greater empathy, to create greater consciousness of how we live, not only environmentally, but with each other socially, with each other economically, how we engage in systems of hyper-exploitation, how we've neglected our own spirits and our own individual spiritual lives, and so on. And so the fixation still remains in all this. And the tragedy for me is that I'm not sure we've literally taken the time to think about this. And, I've heard some people saying, gosh, we've got technology. It now helps you to work from home. You can work remotely. And I've been thinking, it's terrible that some people seem to be busier now than they have been when they were working full time. Yes. So I'm starting to wonder, have we really taken the time to reflect about what all of this actually means?
Talking about then a reflection, Ibrahim, when we look at the governments of the world and their responses to the COVID-19 pandemic within their specific countries, in your opinion, South Africa's government's approach to the COVID-19 pandemic, how has it been? Has it been a fully positive one, or are there some minuses in that positivity?
It's impossible to say that we've done everything absolutely brilliantly, because clearly we have. The policy approaches have been absolutely correct. I think the calling of measures for social distancing the week before the actual hard lockdown happened was appropriate. The kind of, limiting congregations, gatherings of people to less than 100, then imposing strict time frames on certain public amenities, not allowing restaurants and so on to operate beyond 6 o'clock, not allowing serving alcohol at certain hours. All of that was entirely appropriate. Obviously, as I say, it came at the cost of the economy, but it was necessary. The lockdown was also necessary. More importantly, the measures to save people and protect people are also necessary, such as, for example, the policy measures like cutting the interest rate at the Reserve Bank, providing certain interest-free loans or certain grants in aid, and then the big welfare programs which are rolled out by government, such as food distribution and so on. Those at the policy level are entirely appropriate. But you then ask yourself, and you hear reports from the field of people logging on calls for assistance and relief, but only getting it 4 or 5 days later. In some cases, not at all. Or you've got relief measures for businesses and employees, and the websites don't work. Or you can't find the forms that you have to fill out. Or you call a call center and no agent can guide you through a simple process of how you go about either accessing these things or what processes you follow in order to get yourself in. So you can announce all the right measures, but if they don't work, then I'm afraid the social protections, no matter how wonderful they sound, make no real ameliorative effect. So we know that in policy content, it's been absolutely wonderful. At the level of policy operation, I'm afraid it has been less so, but isn't that perpetually the problem of South Africa? Now you think about opposition parties.
Yes.
You think one which is usually quite vocal is completely absent. Another, which is pretending to table an alternative approach, is in fact in accord with the government's approach. So I think South Africa's governance and policy approach has been absolutely spot on. Unfortunately, of course, the operation has left a lot to be desired. And so not just in the operation like that, but in the enforcement of the lockdown. And here you would know that, look, you can't, people say you should have one rule for the formal areas like suburbs and the formal areas of townships and another set of rules for people in densely populated township areas, informal settlements, backyarders, and so on. Now, that's true, but you can't have separate rules for different people.
Yes.
So you've got the same rule for everyone about locking down, about social distancing, but the way in which you apply it must be different. And doesn't it strike you as curious that public representatives, MPs, members of provincial legislatures, local councils, they're always out and about, they always want to be seen, but in the first few days of the lockdown, they were nowhere near to explain to people why this is necessary, how it's going to work, how it will operate, nor did they assist the people who are distributing aid and relief and welfare work to find the indigent. Nor did they assist the security forces to say, look, let's understand the context and the circumstances in which people in densely populated informal settlements and the densely populated area of townships live, and let's find appropriate context-specific solutions to how it would work here. They were nowhere to be seen. And so, unfortunately, what do you have? The security forces, committing abuses of their authority.
Ibrahim, you made mention of political parties and opposition parties. What's your take with regards to the unity shown when the initial lockdown was announced by the government and the president of South Africa? Now we see maybe one party going in an opposite direction with regards to the lockdown, but also then the muteness the no voice that is being shown by the other opposition parties. Is this the way forward? Is the opposition parties, do you think, in the political sphere post-COVID-19 won't have such a voice anymore?
So look, you talking about shifting modes of operation from competition and conflict to sort of more consensus-seeking or more coherent approaches to certain things. Now, in the relationship between politics and governance in periods of crisis or periods of emergency or disaster is necessary. And our law, our constitution makes provision for that in this relationship between politics and governance. And so you see the Disaster Management Act gives extraordinary powers to the executive arm of government. And so ministers, the president, can be given extraordinary powers to make certain decisions without any meaningful checks on them. But that's a misinterpretation. And while it's true that they have latitude, they have greater powers and authority that they can exercise, particularly when it comes to procurement, directing production in the economy, asking the security forces to play a certain role, making decisions which we think will be in the public interest. Obviously, opposition parties often take the back seat because, look, these powers have been granted by law and by the Constitution. So we expect that. And in moments of crisis, emergency, we expect also that they rally behind a national effort which is in the public interest. When it becomes clear that there are abuses of power, there we expect them to speak up. And though we've had incidents of that in certain areas, we haven't seen them being as vociferous as they should be. My view is also that insofar as the Constitution and Disaster Management Act makes provision for greater latitude for the exercise of authority, that doesn't mean that the questions of oversight are completely absent. I've given you some examples of where MPs or local councillors or all public representatives played a role, right? Like in facilitating social distancing, explaining it, helping the security forces apply it in a more context-specific way. That's one set of things. When it comes to the policy measures which have been announced, such as relief efforts, such as the Solidarity Fund, such as the distribution of aid, or now public debates about should we have a special grant for people who are in difficult circumstances, or should we, like the US, provide a once-off grant to every citizen? Our MPs have been completely absent in any of this.
Yes.
Now, one is not saying that you must suddenly distract the president, distract ministers, distract the executive from providing oversight accounts to you. No. One is saying keep an oversight so that oversight is not about catching them out or about being punitive or about being combative. It's about supervision and about direction and about fixing the problems. But if you don't have oversight, if MPs are not playing the independent oversight role that Parliament is meant to play, then you don't have the ability to correct and fix the course. Yes. So we've got to stop being crude about the idea that the executive now has all power and that they can simply go ahead and do as they please. Now, if you say opposition parties won't have a voice posters, I don't think so. I think we might probably revert to type. You're already finding some people saying, oh no, we disagree with this or we agree with that. So, for example, one of the opposition parties agrees with the fact that we should maintain the ban on the sale of alcohol. And that's not just for health reasons. They're obviously doing it for political reasons too. But whether it's political or nefarious or whatever, for now it's a good decision that they're taking to support the executive in this. Yes. Another party believes, well, it's about exercising rights, so we should allow it. But at least they're not being so vociferous that they're being distracting of the executive from their job. But you say, one party is now saying, after initially supporting it, is trying to change course. But if you look carefully at what the DA say, we're talking about the DA in this case, let's be fair, is that while they're pretending, they're tabling something different, the phased lockdown, or what they call a phased lockdown, or smart lockdown, in logic follows precisely what the government intends to do. Have a tight lockdown for now, make continuous assessments as you go along, and in the briefing that was made by the health experts, it was made quite clear that if the infection rates drop to below increases of 90 per day over a few successive days, we could think of relaxing certain aspects of the lockdown. And then you will free up certain areas of the economy where more people might be able to start going to work, but still maintain social distancing and physical distancing and other hygiene measures and so on. Yes. And then more and more you'll open up further areas. However, one has to think very carefully about this, because while you might open up domestically, one has to think about how transmission rates might start to increase if you simply relax entry and access through the border. So the very delicate considerations have to be made, not purely in the political sense, more in the governance sense, about how you go about relaxing the lockdown.
Ibrahim Fakir, a political analyst, Jazakallah for joining us this morning and giving us your view of with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic in South Africa and the current lockdown that we are experiencing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you and your family safe. Please do remember us in your du'as as well. Jazakallah for your time this morning. Fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakumullahu khairan, and du'as for everyone. Request the same. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ameen, inshallah. That was Ibrahim Fakir, political analyst, telling us more about the picture, or painting for us the picture when it comes to the political sphere here in South Africa during this COVID-19 pandemic. It is day number 21 of the lockdown in South Africa. Remember, it has been extended for another 2 more weeks or so till the end of the month, inshallah, and then we will see what's going going to be happening after that. We go for a break, inshallah. When we come back, we're going to be speaking about, once again, those people that they are trying all their best to assist those in need during this difficult times of the COVID-19 pandemic. Keep watching. Welcome back to the COVID-19 update show. Last few minutes with regards to our show this morning. Yeah, it is a Thursday morning, 22nd day of Sha'ban 1441. Last week, we were in discussion with organizations who are in partnership with the Santon Islamic Association and the Fordsburg Muslim Youth Foundation, and talking about the Milli Meal Drive campaign and the importance of contributing to this Milli Meal Drive campaign. They wanted to raise a certain amount of funds to go out there, purchase Milli Meal and distribute to the communities in need. Once again, we're joined by one of the facilitators of this Milli Meal Drive campaign, that is Dr. Ismail Mita. We say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, Doctor, and Jazakallah for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah Zahir for the opportunity. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, I see you've taken a step back, so we can only see a bit of your face. If you can come a bit more forward, inshallah, so the viewers can see how you brushed your teeth this morning. Talking about the Milli Meal Drive campaign, Doctor, do you want to take us through an update of what has happened and transpired from last we spoke?
Alhamdulillah, Zahir. We started the campaign last week, Sunday, and I must say, shukr to Allah that it has been an incredible campaign. We launched last week, Sunday, and as of this morning, we are sitting with in excess of 4 million rand already raised for the Milli Meal. Just as a refresher, the Milli Meal campaign was 60 rand for a bag of Milli Meal, 12.5 kilogram. Everyone asks why 12.5 kilograms? Because 12.5 kilograms feeds a family of 5 for approximately 1 month. It's quite easily affordable, because at 60 rand, you know what, many people can access that kind of donation. So we found that the Milli Meal campaign has been incredibly successful. We are expecting that we will probably reach our target of 100,000 bags by the end of this week, and inshallah we have made a niyyah that we will extend this campaign to 1 million bags of Milli Meal, inshallah.
Inshallah, you're making mention that you're almost going to reach the target, Doctor. Then what's the process after reaching the target? How is the distribution going to be taking place?
Well, alhamdulillah, you know what, the distribution, we've got various distribution partners. Like I've mentioned previously, we have partnered with the Government of Social or Gauteng Social Services Department. And through that collaboration, we've now engaged many other various regions as well. So we've got calls now to distribute in Mpumalanga, the Free State, the Western Cape, KZN. And so this has slowly evolved into a nationwide campaign. And alhamdulillah, you know what, we can only thank Allah. We started with something which we thought would be unachievable, but it's exceeded all our expectations. And between the last 2 days, over the last 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday, we collaborated with government and distributed partial commitments of 30,000 bags to Ekurhuleni. That was on Tuesday. And we distributed yesterday in the region of about 2,500 bags to Gauteng Social Services at the food bank in Boysons. So we are partnering with the with government and depositing the Milli Meal into the food banks. They will then facilitate that distribution in a coordinated way and fully audited and fully transparent. So they've got obviously email, SMS through their SASA offices, as well as the pension databases, and they will access those people, contact them to come and collect the mealie meal from the food banks. Inshallah. So that's a very strategic partnership that, alhamdulillah, we've been fortunate to have.
Inshallah. Doctor, lastly, before we leave you this morning, if anybody still wants to contribute to this mealie meal drive campaign, who do they get in contact with?
Well, basically, the campaign is being run under the banner of Meal SA. We are at www.mealsa.org. Obviously, the crowdfunding platform, tawakkul.org. You can access the bank account details from the Santon Islamic Association, as well as FMYO, Fordsburg Muslim Youth Organization. So there are obviously a variety of bank accounts in which you can make your contribution. But obviously the easiest would be mealsa.org. You'll find all our account details on that platform. We are available on Facebook, or the Meal SA is available on Facebook, WhatsApp, as well as Instagram. So, follow us. And we're going on to Twitter as well.
Inshallah. Dr. Mita, we'll inshallah wish that you people reach the intended target by this today or tomorrow, inshallah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you people also a more barakah in the time and effort that you people are putting in with regards to driving this mealie meal drive campaign. Do remember us in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was Dr. Ismail Mita talking to us about the mealie meal drive campaign. You can contact them, inshallah, and sponsor a bag of mealie meal for those less fortunate and for those that are in need during this most difficult times that we are undergoing, not only in South Africa, but worldwide. We have extended our time for the COVID-19 update show for this morning. We apologize for that, but that brings us to the end of this morning's show. Do remember to make dua for us, especially this evening. Increase the amount of durood that we send upon Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the recitation of Surah Al-Kahf, very important for the day of Friday as well. Inshallah, we'll speak to you once again at next week, Monday morning, inshallah, same time, same place. From myself and the rest of the team, fi amanillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.